So let me tell you a couple of stories, and then we can have a dialogue. First story is that a little over a year ago, you know, I'd left AT&T. When you work in a big company, you have these handlers that follow you around, make sure that you don't by accident wander into the wrong meeting or conference or whatever. They're usually pretty good about that. But when you retire, the first thing you do is you wander into all the wrong meetings and all the wrong, you know, because I think partly on purpose. So at any rate, I started saying yes to literally everything last year. I was just going all kinds of things all over. And one of them was this fancy, it's like a big kind of thing in Washington, D.C. And I brought my wife. Like, she put on a fancy dress. I had a tuxedo on. We go. It's a big room, big ballroom. Sit down, and I'm enjoying myself. It's like a congressman. It looked like a big meet the press kind of thing, right? So I sit down at this table. We're just having a nice time. The speaker gets up, gets to the podium, and he starts speaking. And it wasn't the usual kind of business stuff that I'm used to. Like, it struck me while I was listening that this probably would have been something that my old employer would have said, no, you can't go to. This guy was getting into topics that seemed a little off the normal path, right? So whatever. My wife's kicking me under the table saying, I want to leave. And I'm like, honey, we can't. I had a couple of 4-stars at the table with us. We're going to leave. Right? Duncan wouldn't have left. So the thing ends, whatever, it claps. And I'm sitting there, all of a sudden, I look, and the guy found his way to our table. And he introduces himself. He says, oh, well, I'm apparently aware of my work. Flattery will get you everywhere. And I shake hands, and you know, he says, oh, I want to get more into cyber. I was thinking maybe, you know, you have some interest. I said, oh, well, look, let's exchange cards. So I gave him my card. He gave me his card. Here it is. It says, Lieutenant General Michael T. Flynn. So this is this. I think this business card kicks ass, right? This is like, right? This is the best business card I have. He never called me back. Did he get busy doing something? I don't know. So, at any rate, so second story. For Jack, not me. No, so second story, I get asked by one of the local boards of a financial services company here in New York, would you come speak to our board? And yeah, I'm happy to come. So I had my whole pitch last year. I've changed my pitch, which I'll tell you about in a minute. But last year I had the standard, usual, boring, security is simple, duh, for boards. And I was going to go. And we were going to do a prep, and in the prep, I found out I was going to tag team with a guy who just retired from government. And I sort of knew him. So we did our prep, and we were talking about the old days. You know, I just retired, talking about things, and it was nice to reconnect. So we get there, and you know, we do the pitch to the board. Then he gets up and talks about his experience in government, and afterwards we get back together, and the discussion was, well, I really would like to do more cyber. Could we maybe so we exchanged cards, and the card that I got back, which I don't have in my pocket, is Robert Mueller. So I think it would be awesome if I got those two guys and me. No, maybe not. That'd be a consulting. Me and Flynn and Mueller. Whoa, like show up at your door to do I don't know what, you know. One guy will arrest you, the other, I don't know, but so my point is that the last year and a half has been kind of weird for me. Like, it's been a whirlwind of stuff. And I've learned a lot. I always try to use December to go back and reflect on the year. I think you guys do that too. If you're a manager, then you do that with your team. December, you reflect, and then you do performance reviews, January, February. But it's a good time to think back. So I've been thinking back on what I see in the 5 elements of our industry. I want to share with you today what I've learned. So the first is academia, and for a lot of you go academia, but I think we undercut the importance of the work that goes on in colleges and universities, particularly in the United States. We tend to poo-poo that. It's a big mistake. The second group are the businesses, so CISOs and so on. I'll tell you what I've been learning from them. The third are definitely boards. And I have strong opinions on board of directors that I want to share with you, and I want to ask you to see if you agree with me on something that we should be doing. Fourth would be the tech companies, cybersecurity vendors. There's one question that I can ask, and then in listening to the answer, I know whether you're going to be successful or not. And I talk to 5 or 6 companies per day, and I'm pretty sure I've listened to more pitches than any human being on the planet. I know I have. And I have some tips, maybe read some of my posts, I'll give you some advice. And then the last is government and Trump and the administration and my reach out to them. So I want to share with you in each of those 5 areas what I've seen this year and want to get your impression. But I want to start with academia. Now look, here's the problem we have. What you guys do for a living is based on computing and networking. Whether you have a background in that area or not, what we do is based on computing. It just is. You might not have done that in school, and you might not consider yourself a technologist or engineer. But what we do, cybersecurity, is based on that. And the underlying theoretical basis for that, computer science, is broken. It's broken terribly. And I teach in 2 computer science departments at NYU and Stevens, and I'm a senior advisor at Johns Hopkins through Applied Physics Lab, so I have the whole connection to academia. And computer science is broken. Here's the problem. First off, if you have to call yourself a science, you are not one. So think about that. You know, any discipline that you see in a university that has the word science in it doesn't have laws or repeatability. They don't have the basic experimentation that you need and body of repeatable kind of findings that you need, like chemistry, mathematics, physics. These are things that have been around a while. Computer science doesn't have any of that. And we build our discipline, cybersecurity, on top of something that frankly is broken. And it's going to have to fix itself. Like I think I've told some of you this story before, but I remember Edgar Dijkstra saying, and it resonated with me, that sciences are invented to do things that are usually pretty unnatural, meaning predict the future, live forever. Like chemistry originally had a lot of these potions and things, and then alchemy gets factored out. That mathematics had predict the future, figure out what's lucky, what's not lucky, and numerology gets factored out. It's utterly ridiculous. Astronomy has all the kookiness of astrology and, you know, what days to do this or that. That gets factored out. Computer science today hasn't figured out what its alchemy is. We don't. And we're not able to do even a simple law. Like I wrote an article about Metcalfe's law, which I think is one of the only laws we have, which is wrong. Metcalfe's law says the bigger the network is, the better, right? That's what it says essentially. Like in a phone network, having 2 phones is not as great as having 8 phones, is not as great as having 800. The value grows exponentially with the size of the network. Well, in security, it's the opposite. Building a bigger network makes it worse in our perspective, right? When somebody snaps into Wi-Fi at Starbucks, did they just make that network safer or less safe? Less safe, right? So we don't even have law. We don't even have a single law. So the reason that's a key point is because we're never going to make real progress in cybersecurity until our academic friends, I'm part of it, figure out how to make computer science into computing, where it's a real science, where there's real laws. So I have a lot of academic friends here. A lot of my students are here. Every year I try and highlight a school. We've got a lot of folks here from Stevens, Lehigh, NYU, a few other schools are also represented here. And I can't tell you how important that is to what we all do. And I'd ask each of you, if you're not reaching out to the local computer science department in your town, you ought to connect them in, not to have them, you know, do free work for you, but to urge them to please up their game. Because I mean, look, there is no industry like ours where you can write broken software and it's considered perfectly fine. There's just no industry like that. And furthermore, where you're asked to patch on your nickel and sign away on the I accept screen that it's perfectly fine that the product you just bought is broken. Do you do that with a car? Not at all. The car gets recalled, They apologize to you. CEO resigns. It's a whole big thing when a product has a defect in it, and yet in our industry, we have no basis for building products that are defect-free. Hence, all of you and me, we do cybersecurity to compensate for the fact that we have no underlying framework. So that's a big deal. I think that's something that we really do need to acknowledge. So I hope you'll internalize that. Second, dealing with chief information security officers and teams, my observation right now is that that profession is also a bit of a mess. And here's the problem. You've got people who, for the most part, came up through some technical discipline, and now they're being asked to be an executive. You know, they came up because they were good with routers, or they wrote good code, or they knew a little bit about, maybe they were even in security, and they were tending to firewalls, and then they managed the group, and then they find their way into like a division position where they're managing some security, and then boom, you're made a CISO. Well, what they find is, number one, every company believes that their CISO is unfit for any other job in the corporation. And you know it's true. There's this belief that you do security, but just do that. Like, and if somebody said, hey, we need somebody to run marketing, how about Mary here? She's our CISO. The place would burst out into laughter at the thought that you would even consider Mary for any other job. She's unfit for any other job. She does security. Now, we had one other case where that was true, and that was personnel departments. So if you go back, like if you look at Alfred Sloan's books, those, My Years at General Motors, he has all the org charts in there for GM from the 20s to 30s to 50s up into the 60s. And if you look, there was no personnel department in the 20s, but then you see personnel way down in the bottom corner. About 20 years later, I imagine two people with typewriters typing badges. And then that became a personnel group. And it bubbled up. And today, show me a single Fortune 500 company that doesn't have an HR lead or HR executive reporting directly to the CEO. There isn't one. And I looked. So I went off and I looked at, I sat for the better part of 2 days Googling companies, going on their websites. And I looked. And I kept a crib sheet. I went through most of the Fortune 500. Some make no sense, like Berkshire Hathaway. There's not really a company. That's, you know, the checkbook that invests in companies. So set those aside. But real companies, here's what you find. You find a place where they say, meet our team. And you click on that, and it's these executives. It's a CEO. It's a CFO. It might be a marketing person usually. There's always an HR person. There's a lawyer. There's, you know, maybe a couple other things. Maybe a CIO, but there is never a security person, ever. You never find it. I couldn't find one company, not one, go look, that had a picture of their lead security person in that Meet Our Team. Now, here's what I could find. If you sell next generation firewalls, duh. I mean, I get it. That's not what I mean. I mean banks. I mean companies that are doing, you know, business. Not a single one of them think enough of their chief security officer to put the name there. Look, I was the second CSO or CISO, whatever, after Steve Katz, and I was considered unfit for any other job. The problem was I was unfit for any other job. I'm a bad example. But you get the point, just the fact that they considered it, I'm mad about that. Like, I'm the only one who consider myself unfit and get away with that. But so that is a real, gigantic problem. It is a deep problem because the people who run information security teams were not trained to be executives. They don't know how to be executives, most of them. They're techies like me. And I'm just like, everywhere I go, every single day for the last year and a half, I've talked to at least one of you. Some of you are scattered in the room here. And I hear the same thing over and over again. Like, I've landed in the nut house. Now, you guys all saw Equifax got hacked, and everybody freaked about Susan's music background. Well, who's to say a music background's a bad idea? I don't know. Maybe it's a great idea. It's an executive position. Maybe music would be good. Could certainly do better than we've been doing with the CISOs we have now. I'm not cutting on the CISOs here. I'm just saying everybody's getting the crap hacked out of them. Maybe we should try something else. I thought it was a lot of cheap shots to her. So here's what I've been sort of involved in this year. I've been trying to work with Frank and I, Frank Abelson sitting over on the side here. We worked on something that twisted the Briggs-Myers thing into a self-assessment for personality in cyber. And we've been out letting people take it and see what they say and trying to see if we can create a tool that people could use, I don't know, to self-assess. Let me know. We'll give you code and try it, see if you come out with something. But the point is that the CISO position is in crisis right now. And I think what has to happen is we have to start seeing some cross-fertilization. We have to see some people who either grew up in IT or marketing or legal or whatever take the security job, and the reverse. Like, I'm still waiting to see an information security executive take a non-risk job. Does anybody know if anybody's done that? I can't think of a single one. Isn't that weird? You know that's not right. Like, if you run marketing in a big company, and then the company wants to expand to Mexico or expand to Canada, would it be weird for you to show up as the president of the Canadian division? No, not at all. But how about, well, we took our CISO, we think very highly of her, and now she's going to run our Canadian operation. What? That never happens. So that is a gigantic problem that has to be fixed. It's partly why we get hacked, and it's partly why boards have no clue what's going on. Believe me, I resigned from 2 big ones in the past few months. I'll tell you about that in a minute. So that's the CISOs. Now let's talk about boards. And this one, I'm almost tempted to tell the guys to turn the camera off because I'm going to say some things that's going to completely freak you out. But listen, here's what I need you to do. You don't have to raise your hand, but proverbially and metaphorically raise your right hand. Don't really do it. And here's what I want you to do. Stop training boards. Stop it. Don't agree. You're not to be training boards. When you join a board of directors, you join because you have judgment and experience. You show up ready to go. You ran a company, you were a senior vice president, you did some big thing. So you show up and you know what business is, you know what finance is, you understand marketing, you understand personnel management, you understand operations, maybe a little bit about tech, but you know nothing about security, and you celebrate it. Like, if you go into a board meeting, like I joined the board of M&T Bank, I was there for a year. And if I showed up the first meeting and went, I have a question. Yes, Ed? What's an income statement? Like, there would be social consequences to that at Briggs. Like, maybe we wouldn't get kicked off the board at that instant, but real clear social consequence. It'd be like, shit, a dumb question Ed asked. Know what an income, was he kidding? Didn't know what income statement. What's he doing on the board? And yet, before every meeting, at every board, I go, again, I think I probably win the Guinness Book of World Records for having briefed the most boards. It's what I've been doing the last 10 years, even in my last job. Going around, you go through 3 meetings with the CIO, you start with 15 charts, it gets chopped down to 3 that say nothing, you go in, you scare the board a little bit, you tell them how great their company is, you give the nation state thing, they all go ooh and ah, you walk out, you take a check for $5,000 or something, and you go, okay, see you guys later, and you're out. I've done that so many times that I've stopped because it's wrong. When you go in, and the routine in the beginning, everybody's moved to iPads, so now board members will go, oh, iPad. Could someone help get me on the network here? I need my 8-year-old to get on. Ha ha ha, everybody laughs. No social consequence to that at all. It's fine. Oh yeah, I don't know how to use this technology either. And you're sitting there going, no consequence to having a complete Luddite background. And yet, what's the response? Well, let's bring the security people in to train the board. We don't hire board members to train them. That's not the point. If you have to be trained, what the hell are you doing on the board? I'd like some training in basic finance. Oh, really? Yeah, I'll be on your board now. Maybe we ought to rethink that. When did anybody ever say that about tech or cybersecurity? And then you go and interview board members today. CIO magazine did it. Went out, hey, board members, 50 board members. What's the top thing worrying you? Oh, cyber. Oh, cybersecurity. Oh, hacking. Oh, nation state cyber. And you go, what am I missing here? And how many of them said, why don't we have a picture of our CISO on the website? And how many of them don't even know who the CISO is? Never met them. Don't even know who it is. But probably have the head of audit sitting at every meeting. What the hell's that guy or gal doing there? Get the auditor out. They don't need to be there. What's the point of the auditor sitting there? Yes, we went through 16 audits this quarter, and we did great on all of them. Okay, see you next meeting. And then cybersecurity, get the crap hacked out of you constantly. And the security guy's not there. And when the security guy does come in, it's telephone tag. Here's the telephone tag. Security guy says to the manager, my God, we're an unbelievable explosion of false positives. We don't know what to do in our ops center. It's just exploded. And the manager, knowing there's a board meeting coming up, goes, well, that means that there's more data, right? And you go, yeah. And they go, well, more data is better than less data, right? And you go, yeah, I just told you it. No, wait a minute. Yes or no? Yes. Well, that sounds pretty good, right? So at the next board meeting, the manager gets up and says, we've had a significant increase in telemetry and much greater due diligence due to an increase in the data that's coming into our ops center. Oh, great, thank you, that's fantastic. It's a telephone tag. And here's what's worse. Every one of you in this room has had the experience of that trickle of sweat down your back when you're in a meeting where you don't know what the hell they're talking about. Every one of you have had that. And you sit there and you go, you make yourself physically smaller, and you try to be quiet, and you pray for the meeting to end. And when it ends, you run out and you go, what is SS7? What is that? They kept saying that at that meeting. What is that? Is that a person? Like, I had a guy email me, you see we had our cartoon up on the screen, and said, my manager thinks Hadoop is a guy, could you do a cartoon? And I go, yeah. So we did one. We had Hadoop fired by the manager, and then I made a joke about Job Tracker. It's a very geeky thing, but you get the point. So here's what I would implore you to do. When you're asked to brief the board, brief them. When you're asked to train a board, refuse. So what I've seen is that my ratio of invite to actually show up has dropped by 90%. So I get the invite. Oh, Ed, hey, I hear you're like a speaker, speak to the board, we need somebody to come in. Sure, I'd like to. Let's do a prep. And then I get on with the prep and I go, listen, I'm going to brief them, I'm not going to train them. Oh, well, you are going to talk in business language, right? And I go, no, I'm going to talk in English, but what do you mean business language? Like my joke there is, if you had a bunch of physicists you were going to train in business, and you go, now look, I've talked in your language, so expense, revenue. So how about expense is a force vector in this direction, revenue is a force vector, and all the physicists go, oh yeah, that's not what revenues and expenses are. So what do you mean business language? Cybersecurity is cybersecurity, it's not business language. Stop translating cybersecurity into business language, because when you do, and when you make it simple, you rob the board of that trickle down the back of their neck moment, because they don't run off and say, my God, I don't understand this. They walk out because the speaker was so good, they go, that was a great speech. Gosh, I feel like cyber is really quite simple, isn't it? It's just, you do these 8 things and wow, 90% of the attacks that happened, we saw before. It's just it's the people, really. You know, it's the people. If we didn't have people, it'd be good. And the board all go, oh, yeah. So they conclude, it's the people, we're all a bunch of dummies, it's all really simple, and I get it totally. Stop training boards. Stop it. Brief them. Brief them in language that you would brief to each other. And let them get nervous and freak out and realize they don't know what behavior analytics on a sim means. and they don't even know what a SIM is. And they say, why would there be behavioral analytics on that little card I put into my mobile? And you go, well, go figure it out. You're spelling it wrong. It's something different. You get the point? Stop it. I've come to that epiphany this year, and it's been easier on my constitution. I don't fly around to as many board meetings. I don't make as much $5,000 checks, but whatever. That's not that much money. So that's boards. Tech companies. I've talked to so many. I talk to 1,000 a year. I decided I was going to talk to everybody. And most of the discussions are kind of befuddling. But here's the one question that I ask at some point when I'm meeting a new company. And if they have a great answer to this, they're usually going to be successful. If they have a terrible answer to this, then I usually stop taking notes and I politely thank them and say, listen, best of luck. I'll check out your website. Really appreciate the time. Click. Here's the question. You ready? Why are you in business? I didn't say, what do you do? I didn't say, what features do you have that are different from somebody else's? I didn't ask you, and by the way, the answer sometimes is, well, I knew this guy and we knew we wanted to do something together. And I think, really? That's going to attract customers? Or they'll go, well, I said, why are you in business? Well, you know, I see that I spent X number of years in the military. Like I think in Israel, they rotate the head of the Israeli defense every week. Because everybody who comes in my office used to run the place. And I go, I don't think everybody could run it, right? Somebody had to work there. Like, unless they change the guy who run it every week. Look, I love that place. They're really smart. I wish America would do what they do. They put young people through. It's a great idea. But I'm just saying that the reason to start a company is not because I would like to have been in the military, but they kicked me out, so I got to do something. That's not an answer. What's the right answer? Well, let me give you a couple examples. I met a guy a few years ago that you all know. I met him a lot of years ago. And here's what he told me. He said, Ed, when I was at the FBI, we would get 100 calls almost every day. And we could only answer maybe one of them. And we felt terrible that we couldn't help the other 99. So I figured I better leave the FBI, and maybe we could build a platform to help the other 99. And he became a billionaire because Kevin Mandia had the right idea. That's a pretty damn good reason to be in business. Right? That's a reason. How about this one? Why are you in business? Well, I've devoted my life to cybersecurity. You know, I served my country in several different conflicts. I believed for many years that the physical threat was the real threat. So I put my life on the line because I love my country. But now I notice, guess what? It's more electronic and even weirder. It's in industry. That's where the real front line is. So I feel like I have an obligation to take what I do to help businesses learn from what I learned. And that's how General Alexander started IronNet. There's a couple IronNet folks here. That's a damn good reason to be in business, right? Maybe you agree, maybe you hate the product. I don't know, maybe you love the product. It doesn't matter. That is a damn good reason to be in business. So if you're a tech company, you got to ask yourself honestly, why are you in business? And listen to your answer, and if it's ridiculous, rethink it. Or get out. Like for me, why am I doing Tag Cyber? I didn't like Gartner, and I thought it would be fun to help people who can't afford them, and I thought I could do better. So I call myself the Ungartner. And I get lots of laughs, and everybody goes, yeah, I don't like them, and I go, I don't like them either. Hey, I'll be the Ungartner. And everybody gets it just like that. There you go. So ask yourself, tech companies, why are you in business? Not what are you doing? And by the way, get rid of the first 3 charts in your presentation. Like, I don't even know what your deck is, but I absolutely guarantee that it will be improved by throwing out your first 3 charts, no matter what they are. I know what they are. We all know what they are. Oh, threat increase according to Forrester. And you're like, oh, gosh, please, not another. Here's where threat is going from Forrester. Please, no. Start on page 4. Now, my favorite is government. And then I'll take some questions and we'll bring up our afternoon visitors. government. So if you're like me, you've had a love-hate relationship with the U.S. federal government. It's not so much state and local, right? State and local is a little more blasé. And even law enforcement, I think, is in a different category. I think of those guys, I think very highly of that group. I mean federal government. I mean take the Acela down to D.C. and go in a big building and meet your government. So here's what I believe is the problem. Let me back up and talk about physics first, and then I'll get back to government. You'll see why I say physics. From 1890 to 1930, what happened in physics? We invented the whole rethinking of the world, right? That was a cool time to do physics. And after that period of intense creativity, like all the great physicists, Einstein wrote his seminal papers on, physicists started to look and went, we can do good with this, like you can see the evidence in this room, or we could do bad with this, make big bombs. So Roosevelt was the guy that everybody was nervous about. So Einstein wrote him a letter. Did you ever see that? If you go, you probably at the Spy Museum, they have it on the wall. I know. So you go there. It's this letter that Einstein wrote to Roosevelt. Google it. It's totally worth reading. Where he says, "Look, I'm reading the research here, and I'm reading the results, and I'm getting a little nervous that we've got adversaries who are probably getting close to building a pretty scary bomb. We better get moving with this." And they had to literally have a guy go to Roosevelt and read it to him. Einstein, Albert freaking Einstein, couldn't get a letter to Roosevelt. I have no idea why. It's a fascinating story, but they got it to him, and you all know the history. Now, inspired by that, I looked and I thought, well, 1968 is when we coined the term software engineering. First time it was ever used, NATO conference. My dad was there. And 40 years later, 2008, was one of the most productive years ever. The iPhone, half the things you do in cloud were invented then. Go read Thomas Friedman's book about 2007. So I thought, 40 years of amazing creativity, and now the last 10, all of us are going, can do good with that, but can also do bad, right? So I sat my butt down, and I read Einstein's letter, and I wrote a letter to Trump. And the joke everybody makes is they're always like, come on, dude, you're not Einstein. And my answer is, I may not be Einstein, but that guy ain't Roosevelt. So I took the letter and I thought, how do you get it to Donald Trump? Social media. I tweeted it out. I sent it out to LinkedIn. I'm trying to get it to him. Finally, I get the White House. I get Rob Joyce, I get that group. And I think they got it to him. And I'll tell you the 3 things I said. See if you agree. Because I meant it sincerely. I'm trying to help. I don't care who's in the White House. My worldview is not political. It's, as you've seen, it's all of us who do tech and try and do things, and then kind of everybody else. To me, my enemy is the Luddite who doesn't take the time to learn, because I think what we do is so important. But the first thing I said was, you look like an administration that doesn't really like regulation. So why don't we just make NIST the only framework for anything we do in the United States? You could do that. And I have a feeling if you did, you might tick off some auditors who make money with a lot of different frameworks. Even some GRC companies might not totally like that. But everybody else is going to say, whoa, count me in. So do a NIST assessment, do it once, do it well, and if there are elements of other frameworks that are missing, make them appendices to NIST. And just have one framework. So that's the first thing I said. Second is that I pointed out that cloud is not evil. It's the perimeter that's evil. And we should ask every agency to just write a 1-page statement saying how they're going to break up the perimeter, how they're going to deperimeterize. And if they can't understand the question, then they don't belong in that job. Just ask them, not a lot of pages, not a lot of reports, just how are you going to reduce your dependency on perimeter? So that was the second. And the third is that I did a little research and I see that there's little cyber core programs all over the place. None of them very meaningful, scattered. It's kind of hard to see how it's done. I said, for God's sake, why don't we make a real cyber core program? I mean a real one, where you get like Sergeant Shriver's granddaughter to run it or something, and make it like the Peace Corps, do some public relations around it, make it tough, But when people come out of this cyber core, you don't just send them to NSA, which is where most kids who do cyber core now. You send them to all of us. Industry, civilian agencies, state and local, and guess what else? Fortune 1000 would probably be happy to fund it. And universities would probably be willing to drop some of the tuition to support CyberCore. You could infuse 50,000 kids every year through that program. And if you do the math, over 4 years, you'd have 200,000 young people in the US working amidst us, doing what millennials do. Sleeping till noon, probably, but whatever. But being super creative about how they do their work. Thinking about the problem differently. And you'll find, just like that, cybersecurity will improve everywhere. Imagine the Social Security Administration getting an influx of 500 kids out of a bunch of universities saying, I just finished my 4 years in computer science. I'm here to report for work. And the answer is, well, what are you going to do with them? You're going to put them to work somewhere, and they'll change the face of the agency overnight. You don't have to do any compliance. You don't have to do any legislation. You don't have to buy any new tools. Let them do it. And you know it's true. So I wrote these things to the Trump administration. It's kind of mixed so far. You know, we'll see. I have had a bunch of direct discussions with them. I'm still hopeful. I'm very hopeful on number one. Like, I do think that's a very consistent suggestion for them. I would like to see all of you not have to deal with 20 different compliance frameworks. We all know how ridiculous that can be. On the perimeter thing, I heard Jared Kushner reading at a meeting with the tech companies, a big long thing that I'm pretty sure IBM wrote. It was good, but it had the word cloud in it. I was listening, I go, wait, he said cloud, that's good. Like, not stay away from cloud. But then all the govies got freaked out. You're not allowed to say cloud anymore, so they changed it to shared services. So you never hear federal government say cloud, they always say shared services as a euphemism. So that if you, maybe that's all right. I couldn't care less as long as it's really cloud, because I think cloud is part of the solution. And on CyberCore, that's all of us. I think we need to write to our Congress people and ask them, why aren't we doing something here? This doesn't cost a lot. My wonderful students from Stevens, they'll know, and they'll tell you that in my auditorium, it's probably about 80 students, 75 this year. I would say more than 2/3 of them are on H-1Bs. Maybe 3/4, and I would say that almost all of them, out of the 75, I would say all but maybe 4 or 5 were born in a different country. And I also teach at NYU, same stats. So that tells us something. That's a big problem for our country. You want to talk about a problem in our country? It's, yeah, we're pitted against each other. You got to cut that nonsense out. That's ridiculous, red state, blue state. You shouldn't say that stuff. But I think in our world, we have a problem, and that's that we don't have enough young people going into computer science, and eventually into computing, which I think will be a much better degree. So that's what I've seen. It's a little depressing. My good friend Alberto's here, and I write for his newsletter. I hope you subscribe to the Try That newsletter. I write for it, so you know it's good. No, I'm kidding. But right, I love writing for Alberto's newsletter. But he asked me to write some predictions, and I felt bad because they were so negative. I feel like next year is going to be a frustrating year for all of you. I think that'll be the word. I think you're going to be frustrated that the elections will come, the midterms, and we still won't have a good way to protect elections. We just won't. That'll be frustrating. A lot of you, as you move more mobility into your infrastructure, are going to be frustrated that it still takes 2 to 3 months to patch Android in the best case. That's kind of bad, so you know the hackers are going to go after that. I think the board members are going to start getting frustrated when we stop training them and they realize, whoa, this is harder than we thought, and let them have that little trickle of sweat down their back, and on and on and on. So, Bert, I apologize. I made the newsletter, that issue, a little bit too depressing, but I do think it's going to be a frustrating year.